Well, welcome everybody. Here we are with our fourth presentation of our Career Accelerator program, U.S. Market Awareness. As a reminder, you have had webinars thus far on your orientation, your program welcome. There was a masterclass in LinkedIn with Catherine Buskoff, and of those of you who couldn't attend, that's recorded and on Career Essentials for you to look at. And coming up on December 8th, we're going to have Get Ready for Market. So I'm joined today with Matt Linda, who will be chiming in with his words of wisdom and monitoring the chat. And the presentation is recorded and it will be available for you tomorrow on Career Essentials. So no worries. So next slide, Matt.
Sure.
Yeah. So today we're going to be concentrating on targets, industry trends, and strategies. You know, as a job seeker, you need to understand that being targeted in your job search is critical component to your strategy, especially in today's market. Knowing the industries that are growing, companies that are hiring, and where those opportunities are located is key. Many industries are still growing in these uncertain times, and knowing the roles the companies are hiring for and the skills you need for these roles is very important. So this is going to be our focus today. Okay, so as we focus on targets, and you've heard from me before, the all-important definition of a target, you know, which is industry, function, and location. But in the new world we're in, it's vital to put emphasis on growth industries and companies, functions and roles that are in demand, and locations that are in growing regions. And I know we've talked about it before, but it bears repeating. You know, can anybody tell me why is it important to have a target? You can put it in the chat or speak if you'd like. Why are targets so important?
Good morning, Jane. This is Akhilesh here. So what I understand from a target is that, say, we're coming from different backgrounds, different expertise. We might be looking at going into some different industry functions or career targets. So having a focus or key specific identifiers in context to multiple options, it's very much important. So on that context, I mean, how I correlate this from a career coaching perspective is like, it ideally depends on my career aspirations, how I look forward myself 3 years or 5 years down the line. So from that context, I mean, we decide these factors that, okay, which roles I want to target the moment I graduate from my education.
Absolutely. You know, it's a goal. It's basically, you're going to have a goal in your career targets because you want to know where you're headed. A career target, as you said, it helps you to be focused and strategic in looking for your next big role. Some of you are working already on your targeted job search plan. That's a document where you have that all important data to put into your plan. And as we walk through this presentation, it's important to think about your current targets and ask yourself, are these realistic? Okay, next slide, please.
Sure, sorry.
Yeah.
Slacking already.
That's okay. That's okay. So, you know, how do I validate my targets? So sometimes students come to the MBA and say that I want to work in consulting, or I want to be a product manager, or I want to work in strategy and innovation. And while that's important to have a plan that you're really, really excited about, it's equally important to ensure that that plan is realistic. This is where validating your target comes in. So one thing you could do is research. Does anybody have any idea how they would validate their target through research? How would you do that?
Good morning, Jane. This is Winston.
Hi, Winston.
Hi, I hope you've been well. In order to validate a potential position, I would look for mentors, previous professionals who've gone before me to idealize my career path with theirs.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
And we have them in the chat as well, comparing to the market as well.
Absolutely, validate your target, do research and see how they, a comparison. Akhilesh, did you have a question? Yep.
No, I just have an answer to what Winston added. Yeah.
comment.
So,
Yeah.
so what I would just want to add on that, like the other aspect, what we can do is like we can also try to look on LinkedIn. Okay, if we are targeting a role of a product manager or a business analyst or a consultant, trying to identify people on LinkedIn who are currently working in the same industry or function or in the same role, to get exact clarity and try to assess, okay, how their journey has been to be able to make up to that role. So that way it gives us more clear cut perspective at the industry level that, okay, this is how we're gonna step into those shoes and work out and chart out those career plans for ourselves as well in such a fashion.
Absolutely. So looking at people who are already in the role
Exactly.
is very, very important. Look at their career path, how they got there. You know, so they came from X position to Y position, and how did they do that? How does that progression look? And also, you can look at job descriptions. You know, go online and look at those job descriptions and see, you know, what are the key components. Usually in a job description, the first 4 bullets that you see are the most important bullets that they're looking for. They usually put the priority of what they need first. So it's another way you can assess your skills and see if there's any skill gaps in those job descriptions. Absolutely. Matt, was there anything else in the chat or?
Yep, that's all.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect, perfect.
Oh, we do have one more. Sorry. Oh, it just popped in. Some LinkedIn accounts also are really helpful templates.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks, Alex.
Yes, thank you, Alex. And the next thing is on validating your targets is informational interviews. Does anybody know what well, Akhilesh, you talked a little bit about that, having mentors, people that you can talk to. Has anybody ever had an informational interview? And if you had, what questions did you ask while you were on that informational interview?
Sure, Jane. So yesterday, I would just give an example from an informational interview perspective. There was a program from JP Morgan Chase which happened yesterday. So they shared a complete information from an end-to-end perspective that how their Chase leadership program looks like. What are the kind of people what they're looking for, what sort of business lines one has to go through when they rotate into those leadership programs. They shared the complete details around that, and by the end of it, like once you graduate from that leadership program, what sort of positions you could expect. So it's like they given different touch points, they given us what you should expect, and then they had a session wherein they asked students, I mean, who already have been pursuing that leadership program, and they were addressing the questions from prospective MBA students like us who attended that program.
Yes, that's one way to get information about a certain program. Absolutely. Has anybody had an informational interview where they've met one-on-one with a person to gain information that way? That's really what we call sort of the silver bullet in terms of validating your target. So an informational interview is an informal conversation that you can have with someone working in the area of interest to you. It's also an effective research tool. So you can ask questions to someone in an informational interview like, so tell me about how you started your career. How did you get into this role? What is it like working at your company? What are your day-to-day responsibilities? That's another way to glean information. And there's also templates on LinkedIn on how to go about asking for an informational interview. So that is really a great way to validate your target. Do you have anything to add to that, Matt, in terms of informational interviews? Or
that's what I would say as well. I know Akhilesh
Okay.
just put something back in the chat. I leverage LinkedIn to build meaningful connections to seek as much information as I can. 100%.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
as well.
So that's a great way to validate your target, is to learn from the people that are already in that position. And another way to validate your target, of course, is internships. You get to try it on for size, see if this company or this role is a great fit for you for the future. Okay.
Winston, did you have something?
Yes, just very briefly, I would like to add with respect to what you mentioned about informational interviews. In the summer of 2015, I was fortunate to assist in the internship of a fellow friend. It wasn't my internship, but he was working for Congressman Adam Kinzinger. And I was able to ask Congressman Kinzinger many questions about his background and his path forward. In addition, in the spring of 2015, that very 2 months earlier, I had taken part in an internship at SpaceX, and I was fortunate to speak with Gwyneth the second in command at SpaceX. Elon Musk unfortunately wasn't present when I was there, but we got to speak. We were present during an ABC interview with Gwyneth, and we were able to identify how they were seeking government contracts for many new space launch capabilities they were making.
Wow, great. Yeah,
That's amazing.
all good information
you.
that you can take with you, move forward. Matt likes that one, that story.
Yep. Hey, they just took off. They're at this International Space Station right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So let's move on. So we're going to dive into industry trends and markets. And I think Matt's going to launch a survey for you all. So let's get
Yay.
ready for that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jane. So if everyone can pull out their phone and either scan the code or use your laptop and just go to menti.com. I have the code right here on the screen. So I'm just going to give people a couple seconds, and I'm just going to ask you a couple questions just regarding some industries. There's going to be 2 slides. The first one is, what are the top industries in Boston? So what do you think are the top industries here? There's no right or wrong answer. We just want to see what you are, how your research has been so far coming to this new geography, but as well, what you think, is in our region. I'm going to go over and share this. So now we can start seeing people share their answers live. We got healthcare, financial services, technology, consulting. Yep, these are all great. Logistics, supply chain. Awesome. Jane, are you surprised by any of these answers?
I think they're on the money. I think they're doing
so,
pretty
yeah.
well.
Healthcare, financial services. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Oil and energy. Interesting.
We have lots of participants. It's great. Good job, guys. Yeah, I don't think we have I see in the chat, I don't think we have consulting on there, Matt.
I know. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it's maybe not top 5, but
yeah,
these are definitely top industries for sure, but we're going to share with you the top 5 in the next couple slides.
In a minute. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, guys, for your participation.
All right, so we got about 27. We'll give you guys another 15 seconds here just so we can move on to the next slide. It looks like we're done. That's okay. All right. So now everyone, please look at your screens again. I'm going to advance it now. Now we're going to ask you, what are the top industries in San Francisco? And so this is merely to look at just where the specific Hult campuses are. Okay. We're going to get behind why we're looking at the specific campuses and then going into why maybe it's a good idea to, start adjusting your targets for other locations. So what are the top industries in San Francisco? Just so everyone knows as well, I'm also the dual degree advisor for the business analytics degree in San Francisco. So I'm very familiar with this. My background is working in Seattle and Silicon Valley before coming to Hult. So Jane is our expert for Boston, and I'm going to be the expert for San Francisco. So we got tech. Tech is looking like our largest one here. Absolutely on the spot. Marketing and advertising, healthcare. Yeah, consulting for sure. Gotta say, everyone is spot on with technology.
Technology, marketing, advertising. Yep. And energy. Perfect. Financial services. Excellent.
Great. Other for sure. Yep. Again, remember, these are just, we're going to showcase the top 5. This is not by any means, everything on here I think is a correct answer, but it's good to see like where people are, where industries are placed throughout. All right, give you guys another 15 seconds here and we'll continue on. We got 23 people so far. All righty, Jane, I think we're good here. I'm going to switch back over.
Thanks, Matt. Yep.
Oh, technology, we got a final one in there. Cool. All right, Jane.
Matt, I'm so glad you're running these slides.
Got you.
Everybody knows my experience with running these slides. So thank you.
Yep.
All right, thanks for your participation. So it was some interesting results from Mentimeter. So let's really see what's happening in the Boston market. Since we have campuses there and the San Francisco market, since we have campuses there and given the current climate. So in Boston, you know, healthcare, absolutely. One of the premier regions for healthcare, IT and software. Recruiting and staffing agencies are huge here. We have tons of recruiting and staffing agencies that are part of the Boston makeup. Banking and financial, and of course, education. In San Francisco, let's look at that. We have IT software, biotech, healthcare, medical devices, digital entertainment, social media, fintech, environmental and clean tech are the top industries. Please note, as Matt said, there are other options besides where our campuses are located to look for top industries. There are multiple options, second and third tier cities, where it may be more advantageous for you to get a job. And we'll discuss that in a bit. Students tend to focus on what they know. So we're going to move on to that. Kenneth, staffing agency? Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that. I see the chat. So a staffing agency and recruiting agencies are agencies that hire students either for a third party or for contract or temp work. Sometimes students, I'll just go into, digress a little bit, at the end of the year, if they still haven't found a position, a staffing and recruiting, yeah, it's like a headhunter. A staffing and recruiting agency is a good place to go to find contract work, sometimes to stop the OPT clock.
Jane, also, if I could hop in too. So as everyone can see as well, obviously we have recruiting and staffing as one of the top industries in Boston, but as well education. Boston is the largest, we'll say, college town in America. There's over 100 colleges and universities in and around the Boston metro area. So because of that, there's over 200,000 students that typically live in the city, right? Obviously, pandemic has made it a little more interesting this year, right? So because of that education population of all of these students, that's where recruiting and staffing really comes up, because, you know, there are a lot of students that, you know, as we coach you guys, you know, you do want to use that as a resource. That shouldn't be your only, you know, method of job searching, but absolutely using recruiting staffing firms is, you know, fantastic. Headhunters is where you get more into that executive level searches, which may be a good choice, maybe for some of you MBAs that have more seasoned experience, but typically with typical normal recruiting staffing agencies, those are free services that you can take advantage of. That is that helping hand in your job search.
Yeah, and we wanted to mention Boston and San Francisco as well, because they're highly competitive markets, you know, with limited industry presence. And as Matt just said, a high student population. So your competition is really high for the top industries in this region. There's also a rising cost of living, and much considered for San Francisco. So these are great cities to work in, but we also want to talk about other cities that that are great for to think about when you think about your targets.
Definitely. Also, San Francisco is the #1 most expensive city in the country, followed by New York City, followed by Boston. So looking at where the Hult campuses are, it's a very extremely high cost of living in the cities, which is why Jane's going to get into targets and why we should look at maybe other regions.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so next slide, Maddie.
Sure.
Okay, so here are some of the growth industries that you know, would, as you well can guess, in the world we live in now, they're pretty logical in terms of growth industries. So Matt, you want to just click on that, please? We'll talk about those.
Oh, yep, sure. Sorry.
No worries. Yep.
Turkey.
So healthcare, you know, especially telehealth is growing like crazy with all that's going on. Obviously, online grocery and retailers, the Amazons, Walmarts, Targets of the world. And these jobs are not just line jobs, but operations, logistics, and IT. Delivery services, DoorDash, all the couriers, UPS, you know, FedEx, they're all, you know, really overwhelmed right now with deliveries. So they're you know, growing. Online and digital entertainment, of course, people are staying home watching the Netflix and things like that. Ed tech, you know, as more and more students are upskilling, schools and universities are now online, lots of extra courses for skilling up. That's you know, really growing. and obviously manufacturing and robotics. To create long-term resilience, we'd like to see robotic automation and AI within our supply chains, and more manufacturing as the shift brings to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Also, a lot of these growth industries have startups involved with them. So one thing that you want to be aware of is how startups are funded. We're going to talk about a little bit about that too. Some of the main startup funding sources are TechCrunch, AngelList, and Crunchbase.
Perfect. And there we go.
Yep. So, many of the growth industries, as I said, will be startups, but here are some of the marketing trends. According to LinkedIn, this data comes from the LinkedIn Emerging Job Report. So data science, of course, AI and robotics is booming. Anything connected to data. Online learning, we feel is here to stay. It's going to be part of the future. And then smarter cars are coming, and we're going to talk about second-tier cities have all the jobs, and remote have many jobs. I'm sorry, not all jobs. And remote work is mainstream. So the trends for 2020, according to LinkedIn. Okay, I think Matt is going to talk about the expanded cities list.
Absolutely, sorry about that. And also just a side note here on this, this
sure.
is the QR code that takes you directly to the LinkedIn 2020 Emerging Jobs Report. Highly recommend checking this out. There's a lot of really great data that will help with your research as you're looking into specific industries and locations. Really, really super helpful. I'll have this also at the end in a slide coming up that you can look more in depth as well. But if you can't find it with this QR code, just literally type in LinkedIn 2020 Emerging Jobs Report in Google. It's the first one that pops up. But
Thanks,
as to go into what Jane was talking about, and specifically looking at second-tier cities, yep, wow, sorry, here we go. So this is an interesting map that was pulled by the Milken Institute, showcasing the best performing cities. So the cities above have been tracked by their economic performance using job, wage and salary, and high-tech gross domestic product indicators, okay? So these are generally not as well known to not only international students, but people in general, as they're not the typical hubs that we think of in the US, right? So specifically, I would like to showcase the state of Utah, because you can see there's 3 specific clusters there, which is very fascinating, and looking at the Salt Lake City metro region. So the Salt Lake City metro actually fell 1 spot from number 1 to number 2 in the 2020, but despite the drop, the regional economy has been one of the best in the nation in the last several years, reflected by its rapid pace of job creation and the rising incomes. They actually call the Salt Lake City metro region the Silicon Slopes because it has a high concentration of high-tech industries relative to the size of the economy. So the region's economic growth is driven by a rapid increase in the information sector employment, with 5.3% job growth from 2018 to 2019, leading to an overall total employment growth of 3.3%. So for us in careers, that's pretty exciting numbers, because that means the economy is growing, right? There's lots of jobs, high salaries, low cost of living. It's a winning economy for you, right? So then moving into, this pace of high-tech output growth has solidified the region's efforts to build up the technology contents of the economy. So as such, the Salt Lake City metro area has consistently outperformed other large tech centers in the best performing cities. So looking at Silicon Valley, Seattle, Boston, Austin, right? This is a cheaper place for, employers to go. So speaking of even like tech centers, does anybody know what the top 10 best tech cities in the US are currently right now? We just pulled this past week, so this is fresh off the press, if you will. Any guesses on where we are? Throw it in the chat. Perfect. Cool. Denver, Colorado. Yeah. Anybody else? There's 10. Austin, right on. Beautiful. Palo Alto, Denver, Seattle, Austin, Chicago, Texas. Yeah, Silicon Hills. Perfect. All right. Yeah, great, guys. So if we look at the map again, I want you just to notice like the best performing cities in 2020, largest and smallest, and the correlation to where these tech hubs are, okay? So as I pull this is our top 10 best tech cities in the US. So obviously we have Silicon Valley, that's never going to go away, but obviously Seattle is our #2 tech hub in the country. But then look in Texas here. We have Austin and Dallas. Austin is where Apple's building their second headquarters. And so because of that, every other tech giant is starting to go to Austin, super low rent. I did some research actually on Austin specifically, and you can get a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in Austin for $800 a month. I don't know about you guys here in Boston, but that's about, my rent's about 3 times more than that. So if I'm still making that same salary with that lower cost of income, I think it's smart to like do that. So as we look at other regions as well, Denver, Colorado, Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as Raleigh, North Carolina. Those are happening tech hubs right now that, again, companies are realizing, hey, it's cheap rent. We can still do our same work and attract good talent if we're still paying really good. So keep that in mind as you are creating your targets and are looking, for, specific jobs. It does not have to just stay right here in Boston or San Francisco. I see we have someone from Dallas here. Austin is a sleeper city. I love it. Also, Round Rock is right there too. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, and again, so this is just the top 10. There is a full top 20 list that we can share with you as well. I believe Houston is on there as well, Alex. Texas, Texas is a happening state with especially tech, but because tech attracts talent, that means other industries start to flourish around that, okay? So don't think you just have to target tech, but just know that there's different opportunities out there.
Thank you, Matt. That's awesome. Great information. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Hult alums. We're going to talk a small sampling of where the Hult alums land. And yes, some get hired by the huge tech firms, multinational companies, but as we know from past experience, that Hult graduates are also highly sought after by small SMEs, small to mid-sized enterprises and startups. And here's just a sampling of where students have been hired over the past year or so. So students come to me all the time and say, I have Facebook, Google, Amazon, which are great companies, but don't forget the smaller companies. They're a wonderful place to learn. You often have more responsibility as a smaller company than you would have at a larger company. So, consider the smaller companies that are out there.
Also too, for especially the startup companies, there's just as many students that get sponsored by startups as there are that get sponsored by the large companies, specifically from Hult. So we see our Hult alums have a very even sponsorship rate just with those SMEs, the smaller, medium-sized enterprises, as they do with the larger. So don't discount the little guys. They're still fantastic, opportunity to have.
And there's also a strong correlation between the smaller companies and the cities that Matt was talking about before too. Absolutely. So we just want to keep your eyes open for other opportunities other than the giants out there.
Absolutely. So as we continue on with it, this is a map that represents.
Matt loves the maps.
I like data, guys. I'm a data analytics person, right? So where does the data show? So this is a map that represents where our alumni have landed jobs, literally in almost every 50 states. If one of you want to take a crack at one of those 5 that aren't in yellow, have at it. But this, again, looking at that map where the correlation of where those other tech hubs are, people are going literally everywhere. So again, keep this in mind as your targets are coming up. It's not just the big cities. Think of other regions as well. There's definitely Hult alumni, and as you're doing your informational interviewing and you are maybe interested in going to, I don't know, say Minneapolis or Denver, Colorado, you can reach out to a Hult alum and ask them what their experiences of living there. Maybe you find a great job opportunity but have no idea what's in the city. You can create a connection that way.
Yeah, and we have alumni reps at these cities too.
Definitely, alumni chapters.
So what we do is when you land at one of these cities, we try to hook you up with a Hult alum or part of the alumni association that's there, so you get to know people right away.
We have some messages here. Alaska and Hawaii. Yeah, absolutely. I was surprised by that, but literally I did a deep data search into our LinkedIn alums and went through every single state and made sure that they are physically working in this state at this job. As well, remember, we're in a pandemic, right? So work from the foreseeable future could be remote. So, maybe you do get a job in, say, I don't know, North Dakota, but you could, stay warm and cozy here in Massachusetts. So keep that in mind. Remote work is here to stay.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's talk about some stories of alums from just this past year who received these jobs during the pandemic, for sure. So this is Paul. Paul was a dual citizen from Russia and the US who wanted to build a career here in the United States. He was pivoting industries, but he networked and had clear and realistic targets. Again, we're going to talk to you too about clear and realistic targets. His focus was on tech and small to mid-sized companies, as he was flexible with his geographical location in the US to make himself more marketable. He's now heading up a startup called N-Wave Technologies in Virginia. And this new startup is being funded by Crunchbase. So he's doing very well, very happy, and excited to have such a large role in a small company. Okay. Paula. Paula was an MBA from Peru, who had really valuable experience in customer operations and business process improvement. She targeted jobs specifically that were looking for her language ability. She felt that that was her biggest asset. Not only was her skills, but her language abilities. So many positions, and know this, do need bilingual employees. So for her new role, she was interviewed in all 3 of her languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. She landed a role in Keene, New Hampshire, which is not too far from here. It's a Swiss company called Markham Image. They actually put the M's on M&Ms. They use the ink to put the M's on M&Ms. It's an industrial automation company, and she has a great job as a customer service platform supervisor. Okay. And our last student that I want to highlight, we also get hired at the big names. So Jorge was from Mexico, formerly worked in vendor management and strategic planning at Nestle in Mexico. His goal when he first arrived was sports apparel or sporting industry. That's what he really wanted to do. But he unfortunately was getting little traction on that plan. So that's why you have a plan B. So in the spring, he decided to pivot into consumer goods, has recently landed at P&G in Boston. He's working in the Gillette division. And the good news is with Jorge is that he was interviewed for a lesser position. He applied for a lesser position when he went to Procter & Gamble. But the hiring team decided that he was more suited for a management role and offered him a higher role as a purchasing manager. So all great success stories last year during the pandemic of people who landed. So resources, we're going to talk a little bit about resources that you can utilize to help you with your targets. Go to the next one. So as we discussed in this presentation, doing research both online and offline is critical to your strategy. So now we're going to share with you some additional resources that can continue this process on your own. Okay, so if you're looking to work at a startup or have your own startup, here are some great resources for you to check out to help you get started. Many of our MBAs have taken advantage of these resources to help them get started. Some of them are well known, AngelList, Crunchbase, but there are other, different startup venues out here that you can look at to look for jobs, and if you're interested in a startup to take advantage of. Okay. Matt, I think you're going to talk a little bit about Built-in now.
Yeah,
right?
totally. So
Yep.
Built-in is a really fantastic site for those of you that are targeting the tech sector, and even not necessarily the tech sector. Think of the roles that are inside the tech sector, okay? This is a really fantastic site that you can go on that, as you can see here, this is showcasing some of those hubs that we looked at earlier. So again, giving you lots of information on that. But once you get into a specific city's Built-in page, this is really where you can take it up, and you can see at the very top, the filtering system on the site is fantastic. So yeah, sure, maybe you don't want to role, but maybe you want to go into marketing or more operations, more leadership type of roles. You can absolutely start filtering it, and then filtering by your experience level as well as like location wise, but as you can see, the jobs start showing up underneath, and it's a really, really fantastic resource. Again, not just tech roles, but roles within the tech industry. So again, looking at where your targets are, this could be a really helpful site for you.
Yeah, and and Matt, you mentioned, I think, the in-office or remote function. Amazing. You know,
Right.
it gives you a chance to work all over the, country. So that's great. Okay, so this image is from AngelList. As I mentioned earlier, healthcare is growing exponentially, and here's where you can get, it's another website, you can find more information about all the hot startups that are out there. And again, another way to land a role in the United States is through startups, and internships too are great for startups. So we just wanted to have you see this image of just all the healthcare startups are there and who's hiring. Okay. And another great resource is all the hiring trends on LinkedIn. The LinkedIn Insights and Labor Report, you can glean information on top trending employers, top trending jobs, top trending skills. And this data is all great for you to have your targeted job search plan. This comes out every month, I believe, and it just changes, and you can see what the insights are into what you should target into your plan.
And think about this too as well, like LinkedIn's not anymore just for job searching. Like, yeah, that's what we mainly use it for, but it's a data source, right? This is an algorithmic program that is pulling data from all over the world, from everyone's profile. So if someone changes their job title and their location, that is a data point, right? And because of that, they created these reporting systems that us as job seekers and career coaches can really look at it and look more into it. So if you are targeting a specific, location, like on the screen, you see region right here. So you can change it to, say, Austin, Texas. For the last 3 months, 6 months, year, and then choose your specific industry, and then it starts showcasing those top employers. And if you were to scroll down even more, it would go into other statistics that are very insightful for you. So again, really helping with your research as you are building up your targets.
Right. Excellent. Good point, Matt. Okay, so we want to leave you with this, some steps to consider, where you need to be. A good strategy is consider an internship. If you're doing a 1-year MBA, you certainly have time to do one in the spring. If you're going on to your dual degree, you have an opportunity to do 2 internships, which is amazing. Skill up, know what those gaps are, and start to round out what you need to get the position that you're looking for. There's all kinds of courses on Coursera out there that you can skill up of anything that you need, certifications on LinkedIn, etc. And if you want more education to be prepared to the market with additional skills, consider the dual degree, because that will give you more time to skill up there. So those are the steps we're recommending. And so next steps, we definitely want you to have your resume and LinkedIn in good shape by now. And then the next step would be your targeted job search plan. We've talked about targets all day today. There's actually a form called the Targeted Job Search Plan for those of you who haven't seen it. It's on Career Essentials, Home, Resources. You can start to fill out your Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. We can get together and we can look at that and see if you need to validate it, how realistic is that plan, and book an appointment and we can stay in touch. Okay.
Great. Yep.
All
No other
right.
questions so far.
Well, thanks everybody. Please feel free to reach out if you have any individual questions that you want to ask me. Happy to help you. And onward.